I'd like to welcome you to this third Women in Real Estate lunch here at USC. Thanks for coming out. I'm very pleased to say we now have more than 100 women studying real estate at USC, which is still not enough, but far more than it was 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago when we first had this lunch. I just want to take about 2 minutes to talk about why this is so important to me personally. And I know it's sort of awkward for me, a man, to be welcoming you. And one of my fondest hopes is that when I step down from this job, and it'll be a while before I do that, but when it happens, there's a really good opportunity for a woman to step into my role. And I hope that happens. This is personal to me for 3 reasons. First of all, my mother was a feminist and a pioneer. She was the first chair of the English department at the university where she worked, the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. She started a women's studies program there, and the reason she started it is because women were basically erased from history, as history was taught at that time. And so while, yes, it would be better to just acknowledge women in history classes and political science classes and so on, they weren't. And so she started a new set of classes, essentially, to acknowledge the very important role that women have had in the development of this in other countries. In doing that, she had to put up with a lot of stuff that nobody should have to put up with. She was demeaned. She was told, you shouldn't be taking jobs like that because you have a husband who makes a good living. So why are you denying that job to a man who has a family to support? She was told that women couldn't be leaders. And despite all of that, she persevered. Needless to say, I'm very proud of my mother. She's a very tough person, but she helped move us forward. And I'll never forget that about her. I mean, it's part of who I am. I like to think is who she was. The second thing involves my wife. My wife is a physician. She's a medical school professor at UCLA. And one of the things that's very striking to me is when I go to her conferences, so I get to be her arm candy every now and then, I look at the room, and she's like me. She doesn't look, it looks like I'm married to an age-inappropriate woman, but we're actually about the same age. So she's a senior woman in what she does, very successful. And I go to her conferences, and I look at the room, and the room looks like America. It's about 60% men, 40% women. I know that's not quite there yet, but close. Lots of Latinos, lots of African Americans, lots of East Asians, lots of South Asians. You look at that room and you think, okay, this kind of looks like the country. Medicine was not like that 30 years ago. Medicine 30 years ago was like what real estate is now. When you go to a ULI meeting, I find it invariably depressing. I look out at the room and I see a bunch of people who look just like I do. And for real estate to succeed as a business, it needs to understand who's consuming the real estate. And you know what? The number of white men consuming real estate is a much lower share than it was 40, 50, 60 years ago in this country. So the real estate business needs to adjust. I think one of the ways that happens is through a formal educational process. I think the reason medicine was able to transform itself in roughly a generation was in medicine, your network doesn't matter to whether you get to practice medicine. What basically matters is, do you do reasonably well in organic chemistry in college? That matters. Who your parents are doesn't help with your grade in organic chemistry in college. That is, for those of you who've ever been pre-meds or know med, that's sort of the make or break course. And then you do well on the MCAT, the medical college admissions test, and you get good grades. And then you go to medical school, you do well, residency, fellowship, et cetera. And so there's this ability for women, once they got the opportunity to participate in equals in medicine, they thrived, they succeeded. And my wife was actually in the first national medical school class that had a few more women in it than men in. It was the medical school class of 1995. So I could see how things can be transformed at the highest level in a very short period of time. And I want to see that happen in real estate. And I think that's why we here at USC are doing something really important by formalizing the training process through which people get into the real estate business. So it's thrilling to see all of you here today. It's a much bigger crowd than it was the first time we did this. And it is now my pleasure to welcome our panel, which will be moderated by my brand new colleague, Mary Lynn Bourne. I know Mary Lynn is, where are you? Mary Lynn? So Mary Lynn, will you please come up with your panel? And let me just say a few words about Mary Lynn, and she's going to blush because I've seen her blush before when I've said this. We have a nickname for Mary, which is the unicorn. And the reason is when we were recruiting for her position, we wanted a set of characteristics that we thought would be impossible to find in one person. What the characteristics were was amazing experience in real estate, and she has that as having been a senior executive at Madison Marquette and worked in other places as well. Someone who had excellent experience teaching, and she taught to rave reviews at both the University of Cincinnati and Ohio State University. And somebody with a scholarly bent, and Mary Lynn has a PhD in urban planning from the University of Cincinnati. So we thought, no way, no how could we find somebody who has all three of those characteristics, but we did, and we're really glad that she's here with us. So Mary Lynn, take it away.
Well, thank you. And yeah, how great to be here with all of you. I don't know that I have ever, and I've been in this business a while, so I feel like now I'm officially like the elder stateswoman here. But my career in real estate has spanned about 25 years now. I was trying to count that up. And I don't know that I've ever been in a room with just this many women in real estate all together. So that right there says something. So thank you for having me. I can't say how delighted I am to be part of this USC community, part of this academic community. I see a lot of my students, both men and women, so thank you for coming out and joining all of us. And we have a great panel here, exceptional women that are really making a difference in the real estate industry and really taking a lot of interesting paths as they go through this. So what I'd like to do is just introduce each of them very briefly, and then we'll kind of follow up so that they can talk a little bit more about kind of their background and what they're up to. So my panel includes Allison Warner, who is the Senior Manager of Investments at Regency Centers. I also have Amber Barrios. She is currently working in capital markets at Majestic Realty. I have Emily Gelhaus, who is currently an acquisitions associate at JP Morgan Chase. I have Emily Ware, who is an acquisitions associate at the Olson Company. And then I have Jackie Lucero, who is the Director of Real Estate Transactions at NBC Universal Media. So a great group of women, and thank you all for coming. So what I'd like to do, just to kind of get us going, is for each of you to just go through and kick us off thinking about how you decided on real estate, why you chose real estate to kind of begin your career, and then just a little bit about maybe what you're doing today as you go through that. So I don't think we need to make it too elaborate here. Why don't we start down here and kind of work our way across?
All right, thank you. So I'm Allison Warner, and my background, I actually started as a civil engineer, and my first job was in land development as the engineer, and pretty quickly realized being the person behind the computer wasn't really my calling, and would rather be on the other side of the computer out in the field working on the development side. I started in 2004, so by 2008, land development wasn't exactly the happening business, and I transitioned to construction consulting, where I did a lot of construction contract auditing, trying to keep projects afloat through the downturn. And then when I moved to LA in 2012, the MRED program was the perfect fit to transition myself back into development, but on the owner principal side. So now, as you said, I'm with Regency Centers. The investments group are responsible for acquisitions and development and redevelopment of retail centers, predominantly grocery anchored shopping centers. I would argue the most dynamic and interesting, people might disagree, but I think it's the most dynamic and interesting asset class to be in right now, given the world of retail and the way it's going and how impactful the internet may or may not be on the centers that I built.
So the way I got into real estate, when I was looking at colleges to apply to and what to study, I had become very interested in Sol Price at the time, just policy planning and development school and everything it offered. But it encompassed a lot of pieces, right? There was the policy, the planning, development. And I wanted something that was somewhat entrepreneurial, that was business oriented, and that was tangible in a way that I could see how it was going to impact our community. And so through that process, I happened to have stumbled upon a interview with Rick Caruso on television. And I was already a fan of The Grove, but the way in which he had described what his vision was and his strategy was and how he wanted to impact the community really got me more interested in real estate. And so that's how I eventually decided to study real estate development as my concentration and go on to get my master's in economic development to make sure I had the finance piece. And after I graduated, I went on to work at JP Morgan for 6 years. I actually just recently left 3 months ago, but I was on the real estate lending side, the balance sheet lending side. So I got a really good foundation of what property types were out there, what kind of the structuring of deals were, what construction looked like, and the whole process of a deal from beginning to end.
So I started off at USC in their architecture program. I came here for the 5-year accredited degree program, and the further I got into it, I kind of realized that I wanted to be on the financing side of real estate, helping decide what got built. So then I transferred into Price, so I could take classes in the engineering school, the Price school, the architecture school, and the business school, and kind of round out my education that way. And so I completed the program, and I wound up at JP Morgan Asset Management on the equity side. I was doing asset management for mostly multifamily and then some commercial. And then I transitioned over to acquisitions to learn how to structure and invest in deals. So I'm an associate on that team, and I'm covering all of the West Coast markets and all product types.
Great, thank you.
So I share a lot in common with a lot of these panelists. I started my career out in architecture as well. I spent a few years after graduation working in landscape architecture and master planning. Loved land development, didn't love the fact that projects were coming to me largely baked. A developer would come to us with a project that they had already formed, they knew what they were building, and they were asking us to put together a site plan. And so I came back to USC, and I got everything I had hoped for out of the program. I did a Master of Planning and Master of Real Estate Development here at Price. And when I graduated, I ended up at the Olson Company. And as a director of acquisitions at Olson, I handle land acquisition for all of LA County. And I love what I do. I love building homes. I'm very proud of the product that we build. I very much admire the team that I work with, which I think is the best that you can ask for. And I'm really happy to be here today. So thanks, guys, for having us.
Okay. So I actually kind of stumbled into real estate. I don't have as nice of a story. I was a second semester sophomore, undeclared major, no idea what I wanted to do. My dad recommended public policy planning and development at USC. I was already here, of course, because I used to like looking at real estate in the newspaper when I was like 5. So I took a class with David Sloan. I don't know if he's still here. Best professor. He totally won me over. I joined the major. Junior year, I applied to one single internship with Disney Corporate Real Estate. Thank God I got it. And I loved it. So then I decided, I'm in real estate. I need to do something more real estate-y. So I went to CBRE brokerage, and I realized it wasn't for me. So I went back to Disney Corporate Real Estate, and I loved it. It has the real estate component, but you're also in-house, and you're kind of like managing mini cities, your studio lots. So it had that planning component too, and that visionary component. So I stayed in it, and now I'm at NBC Universal, so I'm kind of bouncing around studios, and I love it.
Great, thank you so much. Well, so Amber, you kind of started us on this a little bit by mentioning a couple of the key skills that you've picked up along the way. But I'm curious to ask the other panelists as well. What skills do you think have really helped you advance your career. And if you had it to do again, if there were skills that you could have picked more up along the way, kind of either in your education or earlier professional life, that would be also useful. And I kind of open that, I open it to kind of anyone, so you can kind of dive in.
I can jump in first with kind of like a big regret of mine that a lot of the ladies up here didn't make the same mistake, is they went straight into finance. So any of you undergrad here, I highly recommend find your first job, find a role that's finance-based, running numbers. I think that's a skill set that's you're always going to come back to it. And like at this point in my career, I know enough to be dangerous. But between us, like 100 people, it's still an insecurity of mine. Like, even though I know enough, it's just a good foundation.
I think I would counter that real quick. I knew nothing about finance before the MRED. I knew how to work an Excel spreadsheet, but I didn't even know what a cap rate was. So I was literally starting from scratch, and I had to work my butt off in the MRED program. That was definitely the hardest class for me to master. Now I would say even in development, we have financial analysts that are running all the models for us at our company. That's our structure. But to me, like larger than being able to do the finance myself, it's the overarching understanding of why is it important and what are your goals at the end of the day. And that's the little bit of everything. I would say kind of the skill set to know when to take a step back and see the big picture and when to take a step forward and dive into the details, and being able to balance those two has probably been most important for me.
That makes me feel better. Thank you.
Kind of going off that, I was also going to mention like knowing how to read the room and having that emotional intelligence, knowing when to speak up and how to make sure that your comments are going to be effective and you're not just speaking to speak, because no one wants that. I think that has really helped me throughout my career to know who I can go to and have an informal mentorship with, or who is going to be more formal, and how to kind of attack a conversation or just approach it in the right way. A lot of that is mental, and it's a soft skill that often you don't think about when you're starting your career, because you think you just want to have the financing right, you want to have the numbers correct, the skills right, and you forget a little bit of like that people-person interaction.
Yeah, that's interesting.
On that note, I would say another important thing that I don't think I did enough in the beginning of my career was to ask for help. So I tried to be very independent, and I didn't want to be a burden to my team. But while you're sitting there spinning your wheels, you're also wasting valuable time. And sometimes the easiest thing is to just admit that you need help and ask your colleagues to assist you, because they want you to do well, and it's a teamwork.
Gosh, these are all great answers. I think one of the things that stands out to me most in a room full of women is that it took me a couple of months ago, in fact, it really has not been very long. I read an article by a researcher at Harvard who talked about what it's like to be a woman in a room full of men. And really, I think it extends beyond just being a woman in a room full of men. It applies, I think, to a lot of minorities. But she said, when you're a woman in a room full of men, it is very common to build yourself into a caricature of one of four kinds: either the Iron Maiden, the mother, the pet, or the seductress. And I think, it took me a long time to realize that there have been moments in my career when I've put myself into all four of those categories. And you don't have to. And I think it took somebody pointing it out to realize that it is a very common thing to put yourself into that position. And once I realized it, it's actually quite easy to not do. You just have to be aware that it is a common inclination, I think, as a woman in a room full of men. And I wish I'd become aware of it sooner, because we really do, I think, as women in real estate, have an opportunity to build trust in a way that others don't. I think we have an opportunity to practice some of those soft skills, soft power and trust building that our counterparts don't necessarily benefit from as naturally. There are benefits as well as drawbacks to being a woman in a room full of men. And so I think once you take yourself out of the natural inclination to put yourself into those four categories, and you start to think about, what do I want to be instead? What's my choice outside of that? You really have a very cool opportunity as a woman in real estate.
So that leads me to a great question. And Sonia begged me when we were doing kind of here are going to be questions. And I was like, I don't know if I really want to dive in that deep. I don't want this to be kind of a caricature of like how women talk to each other about how it's like to be a woman in a man's world, But that said, I will go ahead and just dive right in. So you opened the door for me. So, it is still very male dominated. And I think when I didn't realize this, I've been in the business a really long time, but then I was in academia for a while. So I kind of stepped out, and frankly, I just thought it was like all solved, and kind of like we were done. And then one of my students who's working in real estate right now, she said to me, well, I'm one of 3 women in an office of like 25 people. And I thought, what, really? Like, that's just amazing to me. And I just went to the ULI and same kind of thing. So I think I just assumed that like progress was happening. And, so anyway, so when we talk about that and what it's like to be a woman kind of in a very male-dominated industry, I'm just curious about kind of the particular challenges that you have faced. And also, if you feel that there are, as you guys have touched on a little bit, some advantages too in that. But let's just go ahead and kind of wade right in. So somebody want to tackle that one?
So I'll dive in because my experiences were different through all 3 kind of parts of my career. And what I will say is I was more often the only woman in the room as an engineer and in construction than I have been in real estate. But the role I was placed in was a little bit different. And I never actually experienced anything so terribly challenging other than I found in those situations, women weren't very helpful. A lot of the women in those roles felt like they had clawed their way to the top, and so I should have to as well, and they weren't the best mentors for me. So moving into real estate, it's actually my office is 50% women. But I'll caveat that with they're all property managers and leasing agents. And I didn't know until after I was hired. Turns out I was the first woman to ever be hired by Regency Centers in the investments group. 1, I'm really proud of that. But 2, I was more proud of Regency Centers for making that decision without necessarily making it a big deal. And it just is what it is. And they hired me for my skill set. And that's very much how I approach what I do. And I don't necessarily feel a ton of daily challenges in my company, but what I have experienced is in the real estate industry on the whole, at ULI, at ICSC, there have been some more blatant, like, I get you. You're the arm candy for your boss here, huh? Like literally that's been said to me. Was never so blatant in construction and engineering. And in those moments, you have to kind of do exactly what you're talking about, Emily, is like check yourself and think, okay, who am I going to be in this moment? Like, how am I going to respond to this? And those have been a few of the more difficult challenges because I don't want my response to define me. Like, I want to move through my career being good at what I do because I think I am.
That's a good point. Yeah. Anyone else want to wade into these waters with us? See, this fun part is I get to actually ask the questions and I don't have to answer them. So,
I guess I can take a crack.
Yeah.
I can't recall any specific challenges that I've had, but I think from the onset when I started my career, it was important for me to make sure I had a voice. And so I was always very vocal with what my opinions were, what I thought about certain decisions. Sometimes it was well received and sometimes it wasn't. And so that was a little bit of like that emotional intelligence and people person of learning how to interact and how to get my voice heard in the right way. But I found that it did help me ensure that I had a seat at the table because I was always going to have something to contribute, where some of my women counterparts or colleagues were a little bit more quiet, and so were oftentimes forgotten to be asked into a meeting or weren't thought of to step into a planning session or something like that. And I have had, unfortunately, in situations like you say, where sometimes women can be the more competitive counterpart or not be as helpful or provide that mentorship. And I have found that's where it's checked me to remind myself of who I wanted to be and how I was going to react and kind of step back and say, this is how I don't want to be and this is who I don't want to be, because I think it's important to make sure you're helping the women that are out there and create that relationship and that trust. And so it sometimes is challenging, but I've done my best to not kind of sit and sulk and be upset about it, but think about how I don't want to be that for the next person. And I want to make sure that I can help whoever's coming after me or coming with me.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so I'll kind of change gears and talk a little bit about one of those pricklier issues. If I don't bring it up now, it'll probably come up in the Q&A. But we talked about it when we were getting ready for this meeting. And someone mentioned about promotions, asking for a raise. You know, we talked about kind of being confident in presenting yourself. So, you know, in those kinds of circumstances, if you've had to, you know, promote yourself or, again, ask for a raise or something, you know, have you done that? How has it gone? How did you approach it? You know, it seems like that seems to be a sticking point for a lot of women in that. So would somebody like to talk about that? It can also be just negotiating, you know, your new offer or whatever, you know.
I guess I could start with that. So I think my perspective has completely changed on how I approach it now. Something I do with my friends, this is slightly off topic, but we all tell each other how much we make, our salaries, all my peers. And they're obviously confidants and I don't tell their people, but it's been extremely helpful for me to understand my value and what salary I should be going after and making sure I'm not falling behind, and how to approach asking for a raise. I'm extremely aggressive about it. And I've become more and more so just talking with other people and women. And even companies are shifting the culture. So now you're presenting, you know, I have my sister in her company presents comps of what other people make. They encourage them to go out and interview for jobs, and they know about it, and bring back the offer so that they can show them, well, this is what I was going to be paid here, match it. And basically that's how they determine your value. So I think you have to read your boss. I was listening to some of my panelists' stories about it and how they approach asking for a raise. And I think you really have to read the person. So in my case, when I asked for it, my boss was a very proud person and a very aggressive female. And so I knew I needed to make it seem like it was her idea. So when I approached her, I said, how would you feel about promoting me and giving me a raise? And she immediately was like, I would feel great about that. I've already been planning that. I want to do that. And I was like, this is fabulous. So then I just kind of let her go off on it. But she 100% thought that I was asking a question and she was answering it. And so it was her idea. It was her answer. So that was, you know, that worked out really well for me. I don't know, you know, in the future, I have different bosses now, and I don't know how I'll approach that. I did tell my new boss that came in about a year ago that I was planning on getting a raise within a year on her first day. And that probably was a little aggressive, but it happened. So I don't regret it. Okay, I'm done.
That's good. That's all very helpful.
I think for me, one of the most successful tactics has been to talk about trust. And trust for me is a big part of how I think about my job every day. I think I spend most of my day building trust, both with internal and external stakeholders. So it's a comfortable dialogue for me. It feels like it resonates. It's good for my value system. It fits me. And so it's an authentic way for me to talk about promotions and raises as well. So, you know, I think it was easier for me to go to management at the company and say, look, this promotion is an endorsement for me. It says to me that you trust me. It builds my confidence. And it also says to all of our external stakeholders that you trust me as well. And if it says to our brokers and our land sellers and our vendors that you trust me enough to call me whatever, fill in the blank promotion that you're asking for, you know, it helps me help you. It helps me do better work. It helps me avoid people pushing me aside and trying to come to senior management for a more executive decision. It helps them know that I am senior enough in the company and trusted enough in the company for my answer to matter and to be valuable. So in that way, it felt a little less like I was asking for something that was completely one-sided and felt a little bit more like I was asking for something that was actually helpful and a good thing for the company?
My first asking for a raise story is probably not very helpful because I asked for a raise when I was a first-year analyst, and I did it in a way like, let's set these goals, and if I meet them, I think I should get an X% raise at the end of the year. And my boss kind of laughed, and he was like, oh, you want like an additional raise than the one that's already set by your analyst program and you're guaranteed it? And I was like, oh no, not that. Like, I'll just take the normal raise because it was already set and there's 300 analysts that get the same exact raise. But in terms of compensation, the part of our salary that's variable is your bonus at the end of the year, where all of the managers go in a room or a conference call and they all go to bat for their employees. So in that case, it really helps to have a very strong relationship with your manager so they can go and tell this group of people why you deserve to be ranked ahead of your peers, male and female, and give specific examples. And they've gotten feedback from everyone you work with. So being able to have good work experiences and good examples and times where you've put in your face out there and your work product out there for people to see and being judged off of that has been really helpful. And also just really strong relationships with your managers where you know that they're going to have your back when the time comes to it.
Well, and a couple of you have touched on this just informally as we've talked about your career and kind of working your way through. But I am curious about the role of maybe mentors and champions in your career life, and also probably it rolls into personal life as well. But how mentors or champions have helped you, how you've gone ahead and fostered those kinds of relationships, and any recommendations you have to the audience about how to do that and the role that it's played in your career.
Can I circle back and touch on that last question real quick?
Yeah.
So I don't have great stories about getting promotions or raises or whatever. That's one characteristic I need to work on is promoting myself. But my story is more related to like how we do present ourselves and how we interface. And I had this situation where I was sitting down talking with my boss about, okay, what are the steps to the next, to the next level, the next promotion, and we laid them all out. And then when it came time to actually give it to me, we sat down, we talked about it. It says there's no business case for it, whatever the reasons were. I pushed him on that, and he said, well, clients really want to see a senior manager or whatever the next position was, be a little bit older, be a little more mature, have a little more experience like Mr. So-and-so. And I essentially was in this situation of, wow. Oh, okay. Do you know his years of experience? Do you know what he's done? Like, do you know how old he is? Like, you just took it there. And it turns out we were both on the same exact level. And so my takeaway from that was, why did they perceive someone, why did they perceive, a male person performing the same work I was as older and more mature and more experienced? Like, what am I doing? What am I lacking? And what I found in myself and what I do see in a lot of women is that there are times where, we were talking about having a voice and speaking up and being opinionated, where we won't say something if we're not 110% certain that we're about to say the right thing. Whereas other people might be in a position where they think, I'm 75% sure that's right, so I'm just going to say it. And those people get the seat at the table more often, and those people are sort of viewed more often. And so I've taken, 5 years later, that experience, I've taken that to be more vocal and more confident in my everyday interactions. I still don't like to say something if I'm not 100% sure, but I don't necessarily wait until I'm 110% sure now. So I just wanted to touch on that.
Oh, it's good. I mean, hey, that's what this is all about. So, but I will circle back to the mentors, because I know some of you have had some really great working relationships and people outside of your, jobs too, that have probably made a big impact. So if you can speak to that, that'd be great.
I think I have a little story where my mentor kind of helped me figure out how to go after a promotion. It was 4 years into my being at JP Morgan, and at the time we were trying to revamp and start our LA office, and they needed a senior underwriter, and I was only an underwriter and associate. And at the same time all this was happening, the head of credit for all of JP Morgan Real Estate was moving from Texas to California and was going to be in our office. And so I knew him. I had met him at a couple events by getting myself at the table and having a couple things to say. And I very casually and formally, when he moved, offered if he needed restaurant recommendations or anything him and his wife needed to make them feel more comfortable, I was willing to share, having been in the same town now for 4 years. And so that created a relationship. And from there, we went on to meet every other week to talk about my career and what I wanted and what it looked like. And this man had a career path that I really admired, and I thought I could maybe mirror myself after. And so when this senior underwriter VP position opened up, I had spoken to my direct reports and said, I'd like to be considered. I think I'm ready. And I got a little bit of the same responses. Well, you've only been here 4 years, and typically, that position needs maybe 5 to 6 years. And well, you've only worked on these. There was a couple different excuses, rather, for lack of a better term. And so I thought, well, it's not like I have other experience. So I can't come and say, well, I've done these other things to get myself prepared. Now take a look at me. And I wondered, how do I make myself be looked at seriously? And in speaking with my then mentor, he had talked a lot about speaking your mind and showing, not just asking for what you wanted, but showing your work. You're the best person to show and talk to what you've accomplished and the achievements you've made and your worth for the company. And so in conversations with him and him really encouraging me and saying things like, I would rather someone come and be honest with me than leave the company because they weren't happy about an opportunity they didn't get that I didn't even know that they wanted. And I wrote this very respectful, thought out letter that outlined what I had done in my 4 years, why I thought I would be the best candidate and how I could help the company, and why it would be the most advantageous. And it was a risk, right? Because if they didn't like it, I was probably going to have to go look for another job. But if they liked it, it was going to work out well for everyone. And, the LA office would now have a new underwriter and I would get the promotion I felt I deserved. And so I sent it, and it was well received, and I got their promotion. Some people thought it was a little bit aggressive and probably didn't like my strategy, but my mentor, who was really one of the ones that mattered most, and the team that I worked with really appreciated how I tackled the situation, and I think everyone ended up winning. So
it's a good story. Anyone else?
It's a hard act to follow. But just circling back on kind of the mentorship, and I'm going to tie it to networking, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I think it's really hard to find good mentors. All of mine have happened really organically, because I think at the end of the day, if they don't like you, they're not going to go out on a limb for you. They're not going to help you. So it is really personal. And so I let a lot of them happen organically in the past. But now in my career, I'm getting a little more selective. So I'm actually finding an event, knowing that someone that I want to meet is there. And I think most people hate networking. I personally hate it deep down. Probably shouldn't say that. Sorry, Sonia. But so I go in with a mission. I'm like, okay, here's my mission. You're going to go to this CoreNet event. You're going to talk to that one person you want to talk to, and then you get to leave and you can stop drinking that cocktail that you don't want those calories from. That's the mission. So I go in, find that person, and exchange information, make the best impression I can. And then I'm allowed to leave. So I can go to the gym or whatever else I need to do. So I take a really practical approach now, because I'm not making as many organic relationships with people, because I'm not switching jobs as much. And I have a very strange niche job where I'm in-house. So I'm meeting a lot of entertainment folk that aren't necessarily real estate people. So I'm very selective now, and that's been working so far.
On the networking side, my husband always asks, do you even work? All you do is network. All you do is go eat and drink and have coffee meetings. So I think the integration of that into my daily responsibilities has actually been something I've enjoyed the most. And maybe is more organic for me still, but I'm in a little bit different role, right? I'm in sort of more of an acquisitions and a development role where the larger my network is, the more potential deals are coming my way, and I need to be a little bit more broad. I'm actually kind of curious of all the mentors that people have up here, how many are women versus men? And if you see a difference in having a woman versus a man mentor, if I can ask that question.
I'm 100% split on that. I have a lot of men mentors and a lot of women, and the women are mostly friends, to be honest. The men are professional.
It's a good question. I would say, first of all, mentorship, I think it's a natural human thing to want to be a mentor to someone. And the thing that I've learned over the last couple of years is that people want to be mentors as much as you want to have a mentor. And I don't think I gave enough credit to how badly people just want to help and be good to one another. So the greatest mentors I've had, I haven't asked for. They've actually found me. And that doesn't necessarily mean it will always be the case. And certainly, I don't think that sitting around waiting for mentors to fall out of the sky is the strategy to take. But I think the lesson to be learned is that people really do want to be helpful. And the same goes for informational interviews. As a student, people want to help. People are so excited. On the whole, I think it's a natural human thing to want to be good to the people around you. And so I would say, first and foremost, as a student, just give people the benefit of believing that they want to be good to you. And that's why the thank yous mean so much. You know, people really want to know how much it means to you as a student to have the opportunity to help you. I have had many mentors in my life, but I think there have been two that have been really, really critical and important to me. One man, one woman. And in both cases, I have been impressed and overwhelmed and so grateful for all that they've done for me. So I guess the answer is 50-50. And just remember that people really want to help one another and give them the credit for that. And I think that will just color and drive you as a student doing informationals and getting out into your career and finding your first mentors. I think it really, keeping in mind how badly people want to help one another, I think just helps you to organically return that in kind.
I love that. Keep that in mind.
I wouldn't say I've had many formal mentors. I've had a lot of friends and colleagues and former colleagues that I turn to for advice and ask them a lot of questions and for feedback. And I would say that they're a mix of men and women. But for me, I think I struggle a little bit when I have male mentees. We'll get paired up at JP Morgan. And sometimes I feel like, well, why do they want to be paired with me? Like, there's another 25-year-old man that they would probably look up to and want to pal around with or something. But I think that I have a lot to offer them. It's just about learning how to bond and relate to a young male as well as I would a young female.
That's interesting. So flipping it around.
I just wanted to follow up on what Emily said, how everybody wants to help you, and you need to remember that. I think one of the best things I did for myself when I started at JP Morgan, and some people thought I was a little bit crazy, but I'm also a social butterfly. Every week I met with someone different. They didn't have to be in my group. They didn't have to have anything to do with what I was doing, but they were in the bank, and I was learning who they were. I was learning how I could help them, how they could help me. And I would find how if I met with 10 people, 3 people later would be a great resource. I could help them with something, or they would call me and vice versa. And it really helps everyone to get to know you, who you are, so that they can be a champion of you, both personally and professionally. And now that when I started my new role, I've been there for 3 months now, and I've done the same thing. Every week I meet with someone new. And it's very casual. It's not like I'm there to say, so tell me what you do in your life story. I said, how are you? What do you do on the weekends? It's a very casual conversation to start a relationship so that it can be something more than just a business transaction.
You're looking at me. Do you want me to answer this? All right, I'll let you flip the table. Well, I've been around for a while, so I've had a lot of men and women mentoring me. I would say it's probably, again, pretty close to 50-50. Where I would say, and this is probably where I am in the age dynamic, career dynamic. So I'll throw it back at you when I'm done with the question. But I have 3 children. I have 2 that are grown and in college, and I have 1 that is a freshman in high school. So I think my needs for mentors changed radically and dramatically when I had children. So I would say from a professional perspective, men, women, I had a lot of kind of balance in that regard. But when the rubber hits the road and you are a mom, particularly of young children, trying to juggle a very high-powered executive career, it really helps to have other women that that have been down that path. So I will be that for you, so you can ask me those questions. But, I think that was probably what changed for me in terms of kind of value, whether they were women that were in real estate or women that were professionals in other fields. So with that said, I know you are a new mom, and so this is changing for you and kind of you're entering that world. And, to speak maybe to that a little bit, I think might be helpful about kind of your experience in the transition.
Well, happy to hear you're willing to be a mentor, because there aren't a lot of women out there who are in that role, right? Who are new moms and who have kids. And to be honest, I haven't had that many women mentors that have taken the path that I am pursuing. I've had a few people, quickly, I have a 14-month-old, almost 14-month-old. So this is very new. I'm very tired. And I have a husband who works equally hard in an equally demanding job, and everything about it has to be 50-50. Yeah. And without that, it wouldn't work. If he didn't, and to kind of go back to something Richard said earlier, the days of a man being the sole breadwinner just doesn't work anymore. Like, we can't afford to be a single income family in today's world. So we need both of our incomes. And on top of that, I want to work. I like to work, and I think it's important for my daughter to see me work. My mom worked while I was growing up, and I think that's a good example. But I've had women tell me, wait until you are where you want to be in your career. Wait till you get to that next level before you have kids. And at a certain point, you're like, well, you could wait forever. I've had women tell me they had their kids younger and they just consciously made the decision. They put their career on pause and raised their kids until maybe they were school age. And then they sort of accelerated again to move forward. I don't really want to do either of those things. And I'm right in the middle of trying to figure out, is that possible? I'm right at the cusp of my career of moving to that next level with a 1-year-old at home. And honestly, Emily and I were talking earlier, one of the best things that has happened for me was leaving for 4 months, because that gave them the opportunity to see my value. All of a sudden, I wasn't there. And I came back and they went, oh, wow, we really missed you. So that's actually been good. I don't mean to keep on talking, but it's a huge transition for those of you who have not been there. So it's kind of where that, men and women, it really is very different. The experience is incredibly different. So it is. The demands on men and women is very different. But I will say that for me, we're in San Francisco, and that's a unique market in that all of these technology companies give men and women the same paternity leave, fully paid for a much longer period of time than most real estate companies do. And so I'm sort of the person in the company sort of saying, hey, I know our company's at market with real estate, but we're not at market with all these other companies. I could go to Google and they'll give me 6 months fully paid. And that's a hard job to get, but they're out there. And that's the sort of thing that real estate companies on the whole need to be thinking about. On the flip side, I work for a very family-oriented company. The founder's son still runs it top down, still sort of a family feel. My office is very family oriented, and the men who run my office, they will leave early to go to a baseball game. They're responsible for kids drop off at school in the morning. And that gives me the confidence that I can say, hey, I got to go because I have pickup duty today. And the fact that both the men and women in my office have that responsibility makes it easier for them to see me as equally valuable at home and at work, right? And then, at home, the same thing, my husband has to have the same situation, right? He needs to be able to say, I have to leave early, I have pickup duty. He took 6 weeks off. I would have been knee deep in postpartum depression if he didn't take 6 weeks off. I mean, there's so much I could go on, but at the end of the day, my opinion is, while the demands are different, men need to contribute equally at home for women to start to be seen equally in the workforce. And that's really the only way that we're going to start progressing forward for it to be easier for all of us to do both.
Yeah, great point. So I think we're almost to that place where it's time for a little Q&A. So I don't know how we want to work this in terms of like microphones or people just raise your hand. Okay. So how about we go ahead and start taking some questions from the audience, and feel free to direct them to a particular person if you would like, or to the panel at large. So I'll go ahead and open up the floor here.
Thank you all for coming today. It's been really great to hear all of you speak about your experiences. How can someone like me, a white male in real estate, help encourage women that I speak to who are considering real estate, but they may be afraid of the general workplace environment?
I don't think it's as intimidating as most people, especially undergraduate, might think. I was very surprised when I started in my group that it's probably 50-50 men and women, and there are a lot of women in senior roles at my company. 3 of our 4 commingled fund managers are women, the head of our debt team and our mezzanine team. And so they've definitely paved the way for a lot of younger women to come into the firm and to be taken seriously and valued. So I would just encourage them to apply. I think the hardest problem we see with trying to get more women into the firm is that there's just not enough applicants. And so we'll get maybe 100 applicants for an open position, and maybe 5 of them are female. So it's just about finding qualified candidates, and we want more women.
This kind of goes to what you were saying, Allison, about being taken as a mature woman. When I started CBRE a few years ago, they said you have a few options of how you want to portray yourself as a woman at this company. They said, 1, you can be a little bit like lower your top and like flirt with guys. That's one option.
Ouch.
2, you can be very mature, but you're going to be perceived as a bitch. Or 3, you can be kind of goofy and fun and try to be one of the guys. So what kind of do you recommend? Because like you want to be mature, but like you also want to be like not like a stale woman that like no one wants to be around. I know, sorry, it's a lot.
This gets down to that article. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. What were the 4 qualities that you mentioned, Emily?
Yeah, so it gets right at that article, right? You can be the seductress, the mom, the Iron Maiden. Those were the 3 that you listed: seductress, mom, Iron Maiden, or pet was the one that she put forward.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it gets right at that. And I think just being aware that those are roles that are maybe easy to put yourself in, that you can inflict upon yourself, or you can choose to take an entirely separate path. And I mentioned trust earlier. I think I come back to that over and over again, and I just remind myself that responding quickly to people, being good to people, having integrity, reminding myself of my values every morning, and then choosing to embody them every day, I just go back to values, right? Rather than a character or a role, I remind myself of my values. I try to embody them every day, and I try to believe that people, in the end, they want to work with people who have integrity, who are responsive, who treat them well. And in the end, it's a practice. It's like practicing law or practicing medicine. You know, our practice is evolving every day. But that's what's working for me now. That's what I'm working on now. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I guess I would say, yeah, it's certainly don't put yourself purposefully in any of those roles. I think to focus on being true to yourself and what are your values and be who you are you're gonna go the furthest that way. I was once told that don't be afraid to be a woman in the room, because if you think about it, who's the face everyone's going to remember when you leave? You know, if you walk into a room full of everyone who looks the same and you look different, that is something that it's very true. Don't take that too far, right? Be true to who you are, but don't also be afraid of it, and don't slink back away from that either. I mean, that goes for anyone. I mean, if you're confident in who you are and you have something to give and you be true to that, like try to be the person that they remember when you walk out of the room. Yeah.
Well, and, be excellent, right? I mean, if you're just being excellent and being excellent, then I don't think, then you kind of transcend that whole, I have to fit one way or the other, right?
I have to add to this because I worked at CBRE in the downtown office, and I had a very similar experience to you. And I was actually talking to Allison earlier about this, how I was called into one of the manager's offices, and I thought I was going to get praised on my work ethic or how I had been performing. And instead, it was on how I was dressing. And I was so insulted by it because she was like, could you go talk to the other girls in the office so that they dress like you? And it was very professional. It wasn't seductress, but so I can totally relate. And I don't have like a super great answer for you because I still constantly battle this. And I think it really depends on what company you're in. So every company I've switched to, I have felt different as a young female. At CBRE, it was really tough for me. And I love that company. I work with them constantly now. But I think what the other panels have said is like, be true to yourself is super important. And then that trust that you were talking about too. If you're just true to yourself, and you trust that, people will kind of understand that too. So, actually, I kind of forgot where I was going with that. But anyways, every job I have entered, I have experienced a different thing. And now at NBC Universal, being young and female actually works in my advantage. So I very much like clung on to that and not overemphasized it, but just understood the strengths of it. So I think really be true to yourself and then find women mentors that can help you through it is probably the best advice I could give.
The most pleasant surprise is actually I haven't, and someone I think said this earlier, that it's not that intimidating to be a woman in this industry actually, and it hasn't been as difficult as it might appear to be. It's by no means is it's easy, but I don't think real estate industry is easy. The second part of your question, challenge, or I think how what's the right term? The real estate industry on the whole is behind the curve all around. Technology, women in the industry, just the corporate culture. That's been my biggest disappointment.
Interesting.
I think for me, if I'd have to pick one, it's how the industry is behind and how I feel like I'm constantly having to defend my age. I feel like my age will, in some way or form or fashion, will come up. They're surprised I'm so young, or I look so young, or how could I be doing this when I've only been working for so many years? And I'm constantly finding ways to kind of rebuttal that and show my work. And once I show my work, we're fine. But the fact that we even have to have that conversation sometimes, it's just like, come on.
Interesting.
I think I was surprised on a similar note of just how long it takes to really break into the industry, because you can start off doing the numbers, but it's going to take you so long to learn all different facets of real estate, from the markets to expanding your network, to learning how to structure a deal. You can do so many things in it, and it's just such a niche market, and it takes so long to learn. That I think that's been my biggest surprise, that 3 years in, and I'm still feel like I have like just dipping my toes in the water. So I think I have a long way to go.
All good answers. I think the most pleasant surprise for me, again, is to get back to this idea that people really want to help one another. I have been so humbled and happy and grateful for all the help that people have offered me and by the opportunity to help other people. So that has definitely been my favorite part, my favorite lesson to learn over and over again over the last couple of years. Disappointing. I would say, I look around at this panel and there are so many cool things you can do in real estate. I am so proud of what I do. I am so proud of the product that we build, and I want to do more, and there's just not enough time in the day. And I know that's not unique to women. It's not unique to real estate, but the fact that we have to pick one job to do every day is sometimes, it's a bummer. We're all here because we love what we do. We love people. I think that's a fundamental thing that attracts people to real estate. I think so. I want to do more, I guess. The fact
Come
that
be a developer. We do it all.
Yeah, yes, and I think that's one of the most attractive parts of development. Really,
it's very fun.
The best part to me is kind of what you've touched upon. It's just that it's so multifaceted and there's constantly new things to learn. So even though I'm in transactions, I have to work with project managers, architects, designers, attorneys. I love that. And I also hate it because I want to know everything, but I can't. So I love them constantly learning, but it is constantly challenging too. And I don't think I really have a disappointment. I'm like racking my brain over here.
That's all right. That's good. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's good. All right. Well, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We just loved being here and hearing about all of your various experiences and sharing your wisdom with us. It's been awesome. And Sonia is making her way up for us. So Sonia, you're going to wrap us up for the afternoon. Thank you.
Please join me in thanking our panel today. So I'm very excited for this event each year. This has been our third program, and I think every conversation that we've had has been such an interesting and valuable learning experience. And so for our students in the room today, I'm going to say thank you for coming. The fact that you took advantage of this opportunity says a lot about you and the way you are willing to advance yourself and prepare yourself for your career in real estate. I'm thankful to all of our alumni who are here. Again, to our students, you are here at USC, which is offering you an amazing education, an especially amazing education in the field of real estate. I'm very, very proud of the work that we've been doing in all the degree programs that we offer in real estate. I think that the work we're doing, and especially for our new undergraduate degree, is really helping to advance the profession. And the fact that we've created a degree program which has really attracted so many women, I think is going to fundamentally change the way the industry looks in a very short amount of time. So for our students, continue to take advantage of the opportunities. You have an amazing support system here at USC, but also with all the people here in this room. So again, thank you everyone for coming, and we look forward to seeing you a year from now.